What if we've been lied to? What if we don't need 8 hours of sleep every night in order to be healthy? Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of Recently Read. I am this week reviewing How to Sleep Like a Caveman. This is a book by Marijn van der Laar. Sorry, I'm going to butcher your name. I apologize. He's a Dutch author. He is a sleep scientist and a therapist at Maastricht University in the Netherlands. And this is his first book. While I was reading this, I am definitely intrigued by ways to become healthier, ways to think about how to live our lives a little bit better, and if that includes getting 8 hours of sleep a night. A lot of what Marijn van der Laar was talking about in this book is the research that has been done recently on tribes that still exist today that are almost like a caveman or almost like nomadic tribes throughout history. So they've been looking from in an anthropological perspective about how these tribes go about sleeping and what their habits are. This book was interesting. I do have a couple of underlines here, and I think that a lot of them are revolving around our cognitive abilities and how sleep does support that function of our life. So our current cognitive intelligence might even be the result of the transition from tree sleep to ground sleep. So being able to lie horizontally provides our body with a better chance of being amply rested, recharged on perhaps a more robust level. That might explain why sleeping in airplanes is something that is almost traumatic for most people. Trying to get some semblance of a good night's rest while being vertical, while being upright is very, very difficult. So I think a lot of the research around that area is very interesting in that, we do need to be horizontal. The brain needs to be in a certain position. The spine needs to be in a certain position in order to get that robust sleep. There's another one here, and this one's actually on 2 facing pages. Sleep leads you to see connections more easily and quickly. So being able to have the cognitive ability to put 2 and 2 together. So perhaps you're at work and a colleague says something to you, but you didn't sleep well the night before and maybe even the night before that. And so your ability to put concepts together are just a little bit more foggy than they would be if you had 8 hours or more of sleep. Now I say 8 hours, but I'll get into that in a second. If we reduce the high negative emotional value of a more complex or chronic life-threatening situation, we can plan better. An overly emotional brain does not think very well. So he was discussing again how a lack of sleep can lead to almost like an emotional overload. So I'm sure that you can remember a night that you have not slept very well, that you might have been a little bit more emotional the next day. Now, I don't want to get canceled there on the term of emotional versus non-emotional. This has absolutely nothing to do with hormones whatsoever. But it's just a little harder to think clearly. It's a little harder to regulate the emotional states that you're in when you're just absolutely exhausted. The last line here that I did underline was sleep deprivation can cause you to place more emphasis on the negative things that happen to you over the positive things. So I do think that that is an important thing in our lives, that humans, regardless really of sleep or the lack of sleep, we tend to focus on negative things. We tend to remember the negative things. So he's kind of saying as well that if you lack sleep or you lack that recharge in your life, then that actually compounds that effect. So you don't have that much sleep. You're already focusing on negative things. But again, when you don't have that much sleep, you're focusing more and more on the negative things. So it really is that downward spiral here of your emotional state. Now, he does talk about the amount of hours required for a restful night. And contrary to popular belief, 8 hours is just a number. You don't need 8 hours. And it does vary from person to person. Now, I'm not saying totally life hack your way into being more productive by only sleeping 4 hours. This is, again, a very personal thing. And it could mean that maybe you sleep 6 hours and then maybe you enjoy a nap midway through the day. But he is a strong proponent of the quality of sleep over the quantity of sleep. Now, he does mention in the book that he did suffer from insomnia, and he does talk a lot about and a lot to the insomnia user or reader segment here. So this book, again, if you have insomnia, there might be some tips and tricks in this book that you can employ in your journey to a little more restful sleep. But again, he talks about how the Hanta tribe, which is the tribe that they have been anthropologically studying, their sleep patterns, how they actually don't get 8 hours of sleep and they're still restful. And even when they are sleeping, it's a very light sleep. And their tribe sleeps almost in shifts so that there is somebody who is awake at all times that can be alert or alerted to or alert for any danger to then, hey, say to the rest of the tribe, hey, we got to wake up, we got to move, we got to do something. But it was really nice to hear that if you don't have 8 hours of sleep, it's nothing to worry about. And actually the worrying about it makes the sleep feel less qualitative. So even if you have 6.5 hours of sleep one night, but you feel really rested, like you feel like it was a good sleep, you were really in it, you were deep sleeping. That actually reminds me of another point that he talks about in here. But if you really feel like it was a good quality sleep, then it was a good quality sleep. And you should be happy with that rather than dwelling on the fact that you didn't get exactly 8 hours of sleep. Now, speaking of the quality, he does talk a lot about the sleep cycles. And you've heard about deep sleep, you've heard about REM sleep or REM state sleep. And he talks about how these cycles are generally about 90 minutes. So you want to think about having multiple 90-minute cycles. And maybe that means 7.5 hours of sleep, because that would be, let's do the math, I think 5 cycles. 90 minutes and 90 minutes is 3 hours. Double that, 6 hours. So that's 4 cycles. 5 cycles of that 90 minutes of sleep. So maybe you set your alarm for 7.5 hours for an entire week and see how you feel. The next cadence of that 90 minutes would be 9 hours. So maybe that might be a little too much sleep for you. Maybe that's perfect sleep for you, but you might not have that in your schedule and the flexibility of your schedule to have 9 hours of sleep. So definitely test around with that. Think about the quality of sleep. Think about the 90-minute cycles. And again, maybe getting those 5 cycles or rather 7.5 hours of sleep. I have been over the last few years trying to get better at my sleep, but unfortunately, I like to scroll a lot. So I will be working or continuing to work on getting that adequate sleep, getting at least those 5 cycles, those 7.5 hours every night. I am also one of those people who really like to nap. So I do have a half-hour nap in the afternoon. I think that it just helps me stay cognitively alert and stay emotionally stable. So I would love to hear from you. I would love to hear what you think about sleep. I would love to hear about how many hours really are effective sleep for you. This book itself, I do need to give it a recommendation. I would recommend it probably as a suggested read. So there is a lot of extra words, not necessarily extra information in this book. So I do think that the editor might have been sleeping a little bit, no pun intended. And it really could have been a shorter read. I do wonder also on whether or not there was any AI used, not to generate the words, but to summarize the chapters. There were a couple of places at the ends of chapters, at the beginning of chapters, at the ends of sections, that the summary was just a little robotic, perhaps, or a little formulaic. So there were some spots where I wasn't exactly excited to be reading this book. So again, I do recommend it as a suggested read if this is something that you are interested in, if sleeping has been on your mind, and like me, you're trying to better your sleep, the quality of your sleep, maybe the quantity of your sleep. But anyways, I almost forgot to rate it. So suggested read. And if you have any comments, please drop them below. I can't wait to read all about them. I can't wait to read your opinions about your sleep and about this book if you have read it. Thanks for tuning in. Again, Recently Read will be back next week with another recommendation. If you made it this far, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified of any upcoming episodes. It's free for you, but it means the world to us.